there are several ways that technology is disrupting healthcare. You know, many of us are familiar with wearables, smart watches, information that we provide that are given up, that data is accumulated on us as a personal, as far as our personal health is concerned. But health tech is pivotal in reducing healthcare costs. And there are incredible innovations that have occurred over the last 5 years. And today we have a representative panel that is able to shed light in different capacities of health tech. So, you know, on one hand, we see glucose monitoring devices that are embedded. We find ways that we can actually deliver insulin and in a more moderate way. We have companies that are experts at that. We have companies that are able to diagnose the potential for mental disorders at a much earlier stage than currently exists, and in a much more quantitative way than the subjective methods that actually apply right now. In biotech, for instance, we've seen an enormous merging of technology in biotech. So we see companies like Google, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft that have gotten into the big data aspect of processing huge, vast arrays of genomic data. So each of us has, in every one of our cells, has a DNA that is 3 billion base pairs. Think of it as a ladder with 3 billion steps. That is being sequenced. You know, 20 years ago, it cost $3 billion to sequence each of those genomes. It now costs $1,000 to sequence that. Huge amounts of data is being produced. These companies have entered this space to be able to sequence that data, determine the information that comes from it, and biotech companies in turn benefits from that. So it's actually quite extraordinary what's going on. Now on the payer side, we see insurance companies, for instance, that are saying, we're going to change our policy. We're going to incentivize the policyholders to live healthier lifestyles. But in order to validate that they are living healthier lifestyles, data has to be provided to them. And that data comes from much of the technology that these companies are able to provide. And in turn, the insurance companies will give you charge you a lower premium for insurance if you comply with that. And so these are some of these dynamic changes that are occurring right now. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. Again, Sina from Cognetivity, who's coming from London, England. Thank you very much, Sina. Amir from Bioconscious, who has developed an app called DiaBits that is able to monitor your insulin levels so that you can smooth out the huge variation that occurs in type 1 diabetics. Extraordinary innovation. Hamid, thank you very much. Hamid, you might know from building up TO networks and then selling it to PayPal for $300 million. He's turned his attention to healthcare. And as part of that, he is, from the ground up, actually revolutionizing how healthcare services are delivered in Canada. He could take a top-down approach, apply software and try and sell it to clinics and to doctors' offices and so on, but he has figured out that that's the harder way to do things, and the better way to do things is to actually show it in action, to digitize electronic records and bring in the aspects of telehealth and virtual doctors and everything like that, and make customer records far more efficient. So he has acquired a series of clinics in BC and is building an enormous business. He's basically gone from nothing to, I think you have 13 clinics now?
We're about, we'll do just shy of 30 million in revenue this year with 19 clinics.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And again, in a really short form. And so he's bringing that same innovation to this area.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. This is Eric Brouwer from SQI Diagnostics. It's a company we own, we're extremely bullish on, and what they do is they have spent $80 to $100 million over the many years developing a 96-well array that is able to, it's basically a diagnostic tool, and it serves many roles. It's able to take patient samples and sequence it and get many readouts and much data out of each sample. But the business is diversifying. So initially, Eric's Chief Scientific Officer, SQI, their approach was to work with big biopharma companies, and they count at least 4 of the top 10 biopharma companies as customers, and work with them in their clinical trials to determine the immunogenicity of their drugs. It's an important data point in clinical trials. But they have since branched out into consumer diagnostics. And they are partnered with a company in the US called Microdrop, and they're developing several diagnostic tests for them. So they will not only provide the ability to process these samples, but they will facilitate the processing of those samples as well. And so it's a really interesting partnership. I personally think that they're at the cusp of rapid revenue growth looking out over the next few years. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. If you can spend maybe a couple of minutes describing your company,
I'll be short.
Way more depth than what I've provided.
This is my second time. Cambridge University has spin out. We have a novel technology, disruptive technology, to detect mental health disorders, in particular Alzheimer's, but not limited to that. Just a point of technology, what we have was not. We couldn't do it a few years ago. Now with the precisions we have with the hardware, with computational power that we have in our arsenal, we are able to apply that technology to apply the neuroscience that we wanted to detect the disease, and this is a very important step.
Yeah. Amir?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. Yeah. I'm Amir. I'm the founder of Bioconscious Technologies. Our goal is to integrate medical and wearable sensor technology and apply machine learning to the data that's collected to predict disease onset, monitor disease progression, as well as complications. So the first proof of concept that we've developed using this technology is DiaBits, an app for diabetics, integrates data from their glucose monitor as well as heart rate and activity coming from Fitbit or Apple Watch, and makes a prediction of what is going to happen in the next 60 minutes for the patient. And short of a cure, it effectively allows them to maintain glucose control beyond what was possible before. And yeah, that's essentially what we're working on.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Hamid Shahbazi. I'm the chairman and CEO of Well Health Technologies. As noted earlier, Well is a next-generation healthcare technology company that's modernizing and digitizing healthcare clinics here in Canada. While Canadian healthcare has a lot of positive attributes, accessibility and affordability, technology uptake has not been one of those attributes. We actually rank in the sort of the lowest quartile of the 40 countries that have modern medical systems in the world. Why is that for a very sophisticated broadband-enabled country? Well, because we have a very fragmented primary healthcare system where doctors own and manage their own practices, and technology does not live well in that environment. And so we're very excited to accumulate scale clinically and through the acquisition of medical clinics, so walk-in or family practice clinics, and software companies that support those clinics. And already we're at, in the last 12 months, our clinics have supported more than 600,000 patient visits, worth just shy of 30 million in revenue. Our EMR service supports over 2,000 physicians and 220 clinics. So we really view ourselves as a network of 230 clinics now, of which 19 of them are owned by us. And we're very excited because we believe that scale is really the only, and investment in technology is the way that we take Canadian healthcare to the next level, which ultimately improves outcomes and improves doctor and patient journey. Thank you.
Eric?
Hi, my name is Eric Brouwer. I'm the CSO of SQI Diagnostics. Thanks for the invitation to be here and the introduction to SQI. Our product line is an instrumentation which relies on high automation, and we make kits for running diagnostic kits for tests for human health. And the key technologies that we have, as Eden was mentioning, was the ability to multiplex. From a single biological sample, we can measure upwards of 10, 20, 30 different proteins and DNA pieces of information from the genomic and the proteomic. We're able to do this with high automation and with high customization, so that allows lots of tests to be tested quickly and with low labor costs. And as Eden has mentioned, we've focused on pharmaceutical drug development, but more recently been taking a look at the direct-to-consumer testing market, tackling some of those disease states that are unrecognized and underdiagnosed, such as celiac, launched a product in December of last year, and rheumatoid arthritis. These are all disease states which have a fairly high prevalence rate, but often go underdiagnosed with quite significant human impact. So we're very excited about that growth of our industry in that segment, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Great, delighted to have you, Eric. So tech is disrupting healthcare in a variety of ways, but three general ways that it's doing so is in terms of cost, reducing costs and efficiency, improving efficiency, in terms of innovation, and in terms of personalizing services to individual clients. Can each of you maybe talk to one or all of those components as it affects your business and where you see that you fit in?
So an episode of diagnosis for dementia costs around $5,000. Our referral failure rate is 50%, and this is in the most advanced healthcare systems in the world, such as United States, Canada, and Europe. This 50% failure rate is only applied to 50% of people who actually getting referred. 50% of people never get referred to receive diagnosis. And when the diagnosis delayed, patients are disabled when they're referred to the clinics and then require a lot of care. You can see this cost propagating, getting bigger and bigger at every stage. And the tools that we're using, I think, as you mentioned, medieval is basically understatement. 1906, Dr. Alzheimer's discovered the disease for the first time. He asked memory questions from his patients, and we do the same. If you go to see your doctor at GP level, they ask you how good your memory is, and if you tell them that it's really bad, then they refer you. Then there's a $5,000 minimum episode of diagnosis that you have to pay for. So this is the area that this is what we're going to disrupt, and the cost saving is huge.
Yeah. Sina's company, Cognetivity, has this really innovative software that they use that the patient or the potential patient runs through this 5-minute test, and it's able to actually measure your visual and your speed response, and then they're able to identify different areas of the brain that lights up. And from that, you can tell, and then if you measure that over a period of time, you can see whether it's deteriorating, whether it's stable, and so on. And it's a much more quantitative way. And they're able to correlate the outcomes of this, and it's such a seamless test compared to the expensive tests running through an MRI or something like that. It's such a seamless test to be able to identify if there's any sort of deterioration that's underway. Amir?
You want to go first?
Sure. I think I'm coming at it from the primary healthcare side of things. So, not essentially looking at next generation technology to detect or looking at a lot of the precision stuff that my colleagues are talking about here. But when you consider the state of healthcare in Canada or the United States, the ballooning costs, the application of technology is absolutely critical to help us reduce costs. We, having been acquirers of clinics, we can tell you that the lack of technology, posture, and digitization is really hurting the margins in running these businesses. In Canada, probably less than 10% of clinics have online patient booking, for example. And so what happens, you've got a whole bunch of people sitting there taking phone calls and driving a lot of these businesses with, essentially with manual labor as opposed to, self-service automation tools, whether it's for appointment booking or waiting room automation or self-service check-in. And these are not whiz-bang technologies. There's nothing developmental about these things, but yet when applied to primary healthcare, they can dramatically improve margins. They can dramatically help make these businesses run better and frankly with far better customer service and patient and doctor journeys. So we're just very excited about doing that, and we think that that's a big part of the the strength of our business model is we're bringing very tried, tested, and true technologies that have already been implemented in other countries and applying them to a system that really needs it here. So I would say cost recovery is really paramount.
Yes. And efficiency. Yeah.
So how many people have known someone in their family, friends with celiac disease? It's something that impacts a lot of us, and it's something that's pretty painful and takes a long time to diagnose, and the patient journey there is very frustrating. So we've decided to take our FDA-approved test for celiac and make it direct-to-consumer testing. So that allows people at home to prick their finger, get a blood sample, and send it in and run it on our platform. And what that does is kind of decentralizes the testing, and it eases the path to knowledge for the consumer. The patient actually becomes a consumer and is able to take control of their health. We feel that the technologies of automation and multiplexing are just perfect for that environment, because you can pick up lots of biomarkers. You can be very accurate and scientifically rigorous in assessing the disease state and providing people who need a good diagnosis the opportunity to get that. So we've been focusing on going direct to consumer for some of our technologies, because we feel that that's a huge area of opportunity. It has a huge high impact for people in these cases of underdiagnosed or incorrectly diagnosed disease states. Rheumatoid arthritis is another one that we just launched earlier this week, and we're also looking at extending into cardiac health. These are all disease states that we care about.
Eric, another aspect of I think, the efficiency that your technology brings is that you look at how manual it was to actually process samples, how labor-intensive it was, and what you're able to actually achieve in an automated fashion with the 96-well assays and so on. I mean, it's just extraordinary how much perhaps millions of dollars that you can save some of your biopharma companies a year.
Yeah. So the hardware that runs our test displaces what's called the ELISA test, looking for proteins. It's a very manual. You have a technician that needs to operate a pipette. And with automation and with multiplexing, we can reduce the labor cost by a factor of 20, 30, 40-fold. And when you're doing lots of this testing, it's just a huge efficiency opportunity to take out the labor. Labor is quite expensive. The automation actually helps with the precision and the accuracy. You have fewer mistakes, and the time to results are much faster.
Terrific. Amir, can you talk about DiaBits and launching your app?
Sure. I just want to add a little bit more to what Hamed was saying in terms of like the speed of progress when it comes to healthcare stuff. I've noticed doctors are not really the early adopters, perhaps one of the laggards, and they're terrible communicators. And I can say that because I had two of them for parents. So, and they each sort of spend a lot of time explaining why you can never replace a doctor and what we have right now works. In our case, when we got started, they were like, oh, so this is a great idea, but where's your proof of concept? Here's a proof of concept. And then they were like, oh, because we're doing predictions. They're like, not really sure if 80, 90% accuracy is good, or it's like voice recognition where you have to be accurate in the higher 90s. So we tested our algorithm with BC Children's Hospital to show that it's accurate. Not only it's accurate, it's one of the most accurate ones out there. But then they were like, oh, well, it's great, but will people really adopt this? It's value add. I think there are devices out there, and it's kind of hard for, like I had one of the mentors at Creative Destruction Lab, I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, they were like, well, I have a hard time trying to imagine that you came up with something that IBM and Google and Medtronic were not able to come up with. So yeah, we tested it out, we released it, got 5,000 users, and then the question changed to, well, you said it's easy to get people to download it. Did anybody pay for it? I was like, yeah, we put up a paywall. We got a bunch of customers coming in. And then they're like, okay, great. So how does the FDA now feels about this stuff, right? And so one of the things in terms of, in our case specifically, I don't know how extendable this is to my colleagues, but essentially in our case, it was like, okay, great. So you've shown it's accurate. People are downloading it. That's awesome. But what's the behavior change? And then we had to collect a lot of data around, like, it's accurate, it's helping people, maintain control, it reduces the time for intervention. So with stuff that already exists on the market, you have to wait for something to happen. It's more reactive than essentially proactive. I remember we were talking backstage about like the test for Alzheimer's disease. It was like, how many fingers am I holding up? Can you count it? Is that a correct thing? More or less, yeah, the memory stuff. And by the time you get to the point where you can't count somebody's fingers, or by the time you have hypo or hyperglycemia, it's already too late. You've already done enough damages, right? So the whole point of it is to reduce time for intervention, reduce cost, and I think that's one of the things that payers especially are warming up to. And then for the doctors, it's always like, show me the data, to get them to, buy into the solution, if you will.
Absolutely.
For good reasons, though. For good reasons. Because we're dealing with human body, we're dealing with human health, so we need to take into account. We are dealing with regulators, and it's a long and hard process. But at the end of the day, we cannot afford taking risk when it comes to human body, when it comes to human health, and everything needs to be looked into before we have a product.
You're absolutely right. I'm not contesting that. What I'm saying is it's a fine line between being a laggard and, obviously we appreciate the FDA or Health Canada or whatever to take their time and make sure that, solution coming to the market is well thought out. But for a lot of things, I don't think we need that rigorous of regulation. For instance, in our case, we're, quasi-healthcare, quasi-machine learning. And when we did our sort of live testing with BC Children's Hospital, it was rigorous. We had to go through 3 different ethical bodies to review it because we were doing tests on live patients, in vivo is the expression. If we wanted to do something like that in the States, there was no way we could have done it.
I agree with you. The basic regulators are following it, so they don't understand it. When we first put our pre-submission to the regulators, they called us, you borderline. You're not hardware, you're not software, you're somewhere in between. We need to understand how it works. So I completely understand what you mentioned, but again, it's a sector which needs to be built on risk management, actually.
Fair enough.
Terrific. So in technology, as it addresses healthcare, there are several verticals. I counted basically 5 general verticals that each of these companies will bring a solution to. So biopharma, drug developers of therapeutics, labs that are processing patient samples, insurance companies that are paying for health services for these therapeutics, service providers such as hospitals, nursing homes, home care, and consumers directly. And I know it's a lot, but there are 5 basic customer verticals that I've looked at here. Can you describe maybe which 1 or 2 or 5 that you actually are targeting?
I can start. So when you run a primary care market or a primary care company in the market, you want to be highly interoperable with all those different stakeholder groups. And that is actually one of the big issues in healthcare right now, is the lack of interoperability. There was, I think, a big article in the CBC.ca this morning talking about the idea of a national EMR due to the fact that we still use faxes at scale in healthcare, and that's really crazy if you think about it. And I mean, there's I guess I could begrudgingly say there's some good reasons for it. That the value of that data is so high that it's not just the fact that can you make it operate and flow. You have to obviously have the consents. Just because it can flow, it doesn't mean that it should flow. Yeah. But I think there are solutions to those problems now, and so this lagging behind of interoperability, I think, can now start to be put to bed, and I think this is why this industry is ready for digitization. And so I think it's a very exciting time in healthcare for that reason, and I think anyone that's driving to create a more connected ecosystem can really sort of not only benefit, but also improve patient outcomes. I'm not sure if you've heard of the documentary Greg's Wings, but at this year's eHealth conference in Canada, there's a family whose son passed away due to a very curable form of cancer because his referral got botched, because there was no proper digital process, with respect to phone calls and people not getting the referral and not getting back to him, and months and months and months crept by, and eventually the guy passed away. Just a young guy in his 20s with a very curable form of cancer. I mean, so all this comes back to outcomes. It's not just money, and so I think there's a unique opportunity to improve not only the finances of this industry, but also those outcomes, which is the key.
Yes.
So SQI impacts three of those verticals that you're talking about. We provide efficiency tools for the biopharma to develop antibody-based therapeutics in being able to screen for immunogenicity. So accuracy of drug development, but also the ability to get early validation of the drugs both in the lab and clinically. So relying on high throughput and very accurate diagnostics for that. Taking a look at the lab, we talked about the automation potential for reducing the labor. That will continue to be a massive driver to reduce labor. One of our partners is looking at just getting rid of the human interaction for testing. Okay, that's the vision for the future of just automate and improve the accuracy and the efficiencies for that. And in the third area for us, this direct-to-consumer testing, giving the patient the empowerment to do their testing and get the information that they feel that they need is very, very important. That's going to be a big disruption in the marketplace.
Terrific.
We start with primary care, as we mentioned, and discussed it in details. We're going to help referral success, false positive rates to improve, and also full-on diagnostic at secondary care. Moving medical product aside, we have a product for consumers through health insurers. The idea is to put consumers in the patients of in the middle of their healthcare. They be more involved in preventing the health issues by being more healthy. So that's going to be a product which is going to work like a mental health monitor, something like a blood pressure tool that you can check yourself on daily basis and see if you are on the right track or the wrong track. And last one that we discussed in the previous panel is the drug trial, which is a huge market, as we all know. It has been ineffective, to say the least. And we have something which is really helpful by giving them objective micro-measurement of the impact of the drug. It is something that can help them reducing the cost and risk of drug development.
Excellent. Amir?
In our case, it was obviously no one was willing to give us any time or attention initially, so we had to take it directly to consumer to show that people are willing to pay for it. It's not just something nice to have, it's something that people need. And then recently something pretty interesting that has happened is we got contacted by a device manufacturer and a local company that deals with diabetics to see if they can use the prediction API that we have, licensed to technology. For one of the companies, they think it can help them direct resources as they see fit based on the predictions of the system. The other one just wants to effectively add this to an app that they have. So we had to do the direct to consumer, and now we're sort of trying to figure out what would be the business B2B aspect of it. But whatever money that we make, I think the best way to do it is to give it to the patient for free, have endocrinologists in the background be able to monitor and see how patients are doing without them, being physically present in the clinic, and then sort of have it as a reimbursed solution. In our case, I think that will be the smartest decision.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I guess in terms of, I guess at some point you would like it to become part of the healthcare ecosystem where insurers perhaps are willing to say that we can accept this as a valid reference point.
Right. So what I would really like is for Hamed 230 clinics to actually, I don't know how many of them are actually diabetic, but if for instance they're catering to diabetics, this would be the perfect solution because the patient doesn't have to be there. And the way the Canadian healthcare operates right now is they have an educator, a certified diabetes educator at the hospital calling, or at the clinic, calling people up one by one. What was your glucose yesterday? What is it going to be today? Yeah. What are you trying to figure out? Oh, okay, you know what? How about you come in and see the endocrinologist? It's dated, if nothing else. Something like this can be easily automated, put a little bit of machine learning glare over it, so you classify the patient. These are the ones that are doing perfectly fine. These are the ones that need your attention. These are the ones that need to come in. I think it's beneficial for the doctor and the healthcare system. In effect, it will allow them to, rather than having a shotgun treatment where they fire and one of the pellets is going to hit the target, it will be a coordinated sort of sniper treatment where you're hitting the target, you're hitting the patient that is at most risk.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this very illuminating discussion on how technology is disrupting healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thanks.